Welcome to the Daily Items Winter Sports Podcast, a weekly look at what's happening with the Susquehanna Valley's high school and college teams. From Bucknell and Susquehanna University men's and women's basketball to all the high school hoops, wrestling, swimming, and more, the Daily Items Sports Team has the latest on the players, coaches, and teams to watch. Now, here's your host, Daily Items Sports Editor, Kurt Ritzman.
Hello and welcome to our first ever Winter Sports Podcast. I'm Kurt and I'm joined right now by Todd Hummel, who you recognize from the football podcast, I'm sure.
I hope so.
And we're going to start with put a little bow on the football season before we dive into our winter sports. So Southern Columbia State champions. What
Shocker.
A surprise.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we started the entire podcast, the football podcast out with that. And they did not disappoint. Actually, a better game than you thought it was going to be. It turns out I was right.
I was I was real close. I said 56-14. It was 49-14.
You were close in the score, but it was 14-7 late in that first half until Southern hit I guess what you would call it. It was a pretty controversial touchdown. I think it was pretty obvious on TV that Gage was down short of the goal line on that play. But, you know, as I said, and I think I was in the notebook, if they they timed the 2-point. They lost 8 seconds on the 2-point conversion, so it all evens out in the end. And the way Southern played in that second half, solved some of those problems on third down that they had in the first half. The way that second half went, it didn't look like it was that it really ended up being much of a difference. But I guess mentally, if Wilmington's up 14-7 rather than Southern getting that touchdown late, maybe it is a little different in that third quarter, but. The Southern defensive line took over in that second half and really didn't allow Wilmington much offensively, picked off the quarterback twice. And, Gage and Gavin Garcia were pretty good. Just missed both rushing for 100 yards. Gage had 119-3, and I had Gavin at 98-2 in that game. So, the offensive line really controlled the second half of the game, and Southern was able to pick up a 9th state title. And it's funny, even before Coach Roth talked to the team after the game, they were telling the kids that the weight room was open for next year on Monday to start getting ready for next year. So, they fully expect to be in the same spot next year. Probably maybe a couple more holes to fill next year, especially up front. I think only one lineman back next year.
Is that offensive or both sides?
That's offensive.
Okay.
Purcell and Lear Quentin are both back on the defensive side. Okay. Robert Williams will be gone. They probably won't be as deep on the line, but of course, I think that means Preston Zachman at quarterback. Gage and Gavin will be back. Ty will be back. Almost all their skill position players will have to find a receiver opposite Julian, but I think that should be it's probably the least of Jim Roth's concerns next year, especially with a line like that. But yeah, I think people expect Southern to be there next year, and I think if I did the math right, if they go undefeated next year and win a state title, that will leave Coach Roth with 454 wins, one short of George Curry for the all-time record in the state.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's all we're going to talk about fall sports, except for this last tease. Daily Item All-Stars starting Tuesday the 18th, culminating on Christmas Day with Todd's football team. So make sure you guys check out those week or so of papers. Pick up the papers between now and then too. They'll be filled with winter sports stuff. But if you're excited for the all daily item teams, then they'll be coming. Transitioning from Southern football, I want to talk a little bit about wrestling.
Okay.
Southern ranked the top team in the preseason in their class. Now. Right now, they may not be quite as good. Some of their best wrestlers are maybe in football shape instead of wrestling shape.
Yeah, it usually seems like it takes them, January. And I think last year they really didn't do much until whenever that tournament is down in, I think it's Carlisle.
Oh, right.
And so I think that's like closer to maybe another week or two. So. Yeah, with Gage Garcia, Cal Halliday, Lear Quentin, Cade Lynn. There's Gavin is a wrestler. Gavin Garcia is a wrestler. I was looking at something. I think it's PA Power Wrestle ranked the top freshman, and they have Southern Wrestling has two of the top freshmen in Gavin Garcia, and there was another Dyer.
I think so.
Dyer Stein, is that it? I shouldn't guess on names,
no,
but he's a freshman, and he was number 6. I think there was another one honorable mention. So, like football, the rich just seem to get richer, out at Southern. That's just an amazing group of athletes that is coming through there right now. And, I got to see them a little bit last year down at the team tournament down there for that Friday, and they're pretty impressive on the mat. And it'll be interesting come March in that dual meet tournament if they can pull that off. Some of those teams out west in Class AA are pretty tough usually, but it will be, it is nice to see them number 1 going into the season.
Sure. Throughout the Winter Sports Podcast, Chris Nagy will be joining me to talk wrestling. He's not here today, unable to make it for week 1, so Todd and I are going to throw out our
covering a wrestling match.
Yeah, he's going to be at a wrestling match tonight or Wednesday night when we tape. So when you see this, you can pick up the paper and read about Danville Mifflinburg with Chris's coverage on that. A couple things he wanted me to point out. I talked to him, did a little phone interview, didn't think to tape it, but he said numbers are up, especially at small schools, so health of wrestling is good in the area. He covered Selinsgrove Central Mountain last night. Central Mountain won, but the score was deceiving.
I think it was 9 pins in a row.
Yeah, 8 wins in a row, not all pins. Central Mountain won all the toss-ups, but I said Selinsgrove looked good in the loss. They got a couple nice wins, Nate Schoen and Coy Bastion. And the one thing that I wanted to point out is Schick went to a season opening tournament Saturday, got 2 victories. Cade Balestrini and Adam Young both took first place in that. So keep an eye on those guys for the Braves.
Braves made the team tournament last year too.
Yeah.
Probably going to come down to them in Selinsgrove in District 4 in 3A, and I think they go out to 10 and 9. I think in 3A. So keep an eye out on that.
4-9.
4-9.
Yeah.
4-9, 10.
No 10, but
no 10.
But so keep an eye. A lot of exciting things this wrestling season. Todd, boys basketball beat. You've seen one game so far. Busy with some football stuff at the beginning of the season. What did you see Danville Central Mountain that jumped out to you? A nice win for the Ironmen?
Well, there was a stretch in the third quarter where Danville looked like, where most people think Danville's going to be this season. Dyson Harward, who missed last season with an ACL, really, Coach Smith said they did play over the weekend, but it was his best game of the early season. He seemed to be real confident. He had 20 and 10. I did talk to Dyson a little bit last night about coming back from that knee injury.
It was good. I've been playing all summer, so the biggest thing was just playing in front of all my friends and all that stuff. That was the only nervous part of it. Foul trouble I was really worried about.
Yeah.
Just 2 quick ones, and then I just played through it.
What were you guys trying to do, defensively with Jones? And it seems like you guys were kind of able to kind of juggle some defenses there, start you out on him a little bit. Had you on him, had Mavin on him. Is that kind of the game plan? Throw different looks at him?
Yeah, we were trying to throw some length on him because, he's good inside and everything. But pretty much, we basically said make everyone else beat us, not him.
Did you take it upon yourself to be a little more aggressive offensively in the second half?
I just let it come to me. My teammates did a great job with it. They found me open. They got me the ball. Everything. It was great.
So, and it's a lot of the same names in football, too, for Danville. Shane Kozik and Peyton Riley in the backcourt. Coleman Cush, who was the starting point guard last year, coming off the bench. Or Mavin James is starting this season. He came off the bench last season. And that gives them a lot of length that helps defensively. They did a real good job on Colin Jones last night for the most part. He ended up with 23 points. But most of that came in the fourth quarter after it was already a 21-point game in a Central Mountain rally to make it a 10-point game. I think Danville and Shamokin are probably the 2 clear favorites right now in Division I.
Okay.
In Division I of the HAC. Central Mountain probably has the best player in Colin Jones. So you have to watch out for them. For Selinsgrove and Schick, they're Class 5A this year. I'm going to have to qualify through District 11. A lot of unknowns for both of those teams.
Okay.
Shikellamy returns Darrell Lyles, who has played quite well these first 3 games of the season.
He had 23 and 8.
Yeah.
Tuesday night in a close loss to Jersey Shore.
Yeah. And they're looking to get Lucas Tilford back, who's been dealing with a nagging injury from football since the opening game of the season. And for Selinsgrove, they have Colton Elsaid back, who has also played well. Had a big game, the first game of the season when they beat Berwick. But he
had a bunch of 3-pointers, maybe 6 3-pointers that game.
Yes, yeah. And the thing about the Seals is, they have a lot of depth. He's going to Coach Stabella is going to go 10, 11 deep. They have a little bit of size. 3 guys about 6'4", 6'5". It's just a matter of getting some experience and seeing what you can put together by the end of the season to get into that District 11 playoffs.
And real early in the season, we've had 4 game days as we're sitting here talking. I want to talk a little bit about 2 teams that struggled last year. Midwest and Lion Mountain played a overtime game at the Macy Minier third place tournament at Schick on Saturday. And then Midwest won that, and then Midwest came and got another win last night to be 2-1, which ties their win total from last year.
Only had 2 wins last year.
And Lion Mountain picked up a TVL win over Juniata, I think. And I know they really struggled last year, having a chance to win 2 games early, getting a win in their 3rd game of the year.
Well, Midwest first-year coach Lance Adams, ironically enough, was the coach at Lion Mountain for a long time ago, about 10 years ago. For Midwest has always had a lot of athletes. Obviously, the boys soccer team is successful. The football team as well had a pretty good fall. Not a lot of basketball players over these last several years, and this is the senior. Lance is the senior's 4th coach in 4 years.
Yeah,
so
that's crazy.
It's kind of hard to get anything going when you're going through that much turmoil. His hopes coming into this season are to be competitive. With the power rankings and 8 teams getting in, you don't have to be 500 to get into the playoffs. And they've already got 2 wins. There's parts of their schedule that they feel that they can be competitive with some teams that they can win some of those games. Now, on the other hand, they're in Division 2, so they're going to have 2 games against Loyal Sock, which probably isn't going to go well. But, that's not going to go well for a lot of teams. They're pretty clearly the favorite in Division 2. And, Lion Mountain, the bottom of the TVL is probably a good chance for them to get healthy and get close to 500 this season. East Juniata is coming off a losing season. They have a lot back, and they have a win over Susquehanna. Susquehanna didn't win a game last year. I don't think Millersburg is supposed to be okay, but in that Eastern Division, I think Halifax is probably a clear favorite there. Beat them by like 18 or 20 on Monday night in the TVL opener.
Yeah, it was close for the first half or so.
Yeah. So, I think Lion Mountain could be competitive with those teams, and that gets them into, they're 2A in District 4, and that's a lot of schools that they can be competitive with in basketball. That gets you out of the Loyal Sox, the Danvilles, and some of those bigger schools. And
you also avoid Lourdes.
Who's Class A.
Yeah.
But I think right now Millville's probably the favorite in 2A, and the rest of that field's probably fairly tight. So, if you can get in there and make some noise, that's got to be big for that program, because it's been, they got close. I think they got close to making districts in C.J. Reichert's freshman year, so that's almost 5 years ago now when he played basketball at Lion Mountain. And before that, I think Lance was the coach the last time they made districts. Wow. So it's been a long time down there too.
Anything else from the first few days of the season jumped out to you want to touch on?
The biggest thing I think that I saw was Loyal Sox really good. I think a lot of people expect a lot out of North Penn Mansfield this year in 3A, and they put 100 points on them and beat them by 40 in the championship game of their tournament on Saturday. And Mount Carmel. The other thing that sticks out is Mount Carmel is going to be real good this year in boys basketball. They were Division III champs last year. Went out for the 2nd straight time in the first round of districts. But, they found themselves a 3rd scorer in Michael Balachik, who's, as a freshman, started last year. When I talked to Coach Lazicki on Sunday, he said the biggest thing is confidence. And he's been double figures all 3 games. He had 19 and 18 the first 2 games. And with three consistent scorers in Balachik, Donovan James, and Tommy Reisinger, Coach Lazicki thinks they have a legitimate shot had them in Southern in Division III, and really, gives themselves a chance against that Loyalsock team in the playoffs.
I got a chance to see Mount Carmel probably more than any other boys basketball team last year. It was only 2 or 3 times, but what impressed me about them was they have guys who do the dirty work that doesn't show up on. I mean, I watched John Ayers probably set 50 screens in that game and maybe take 3 shots, and it's just I don't know that there are a ton of teams around here who have tough kids like that are willing to do those things that no one notices if they're not paying attention.
Well, and I wonder if that's coming up. When he played junior high basketball, Thomas Schultz and Dylan Farinato were still at Mount Carmel. So add in Donovan James and Tommy. As I don't know if there was many balls to go around in those junior high and those youngster games to get. Actually, until he was 12, Nick Shedleski was out there too. So there was not a lot of balls to go around out there to score with. So. And that's something Coach Lizicki talked about too. Is those guys? It'll be he and Michael Hood kind of in that role for Mount Carmel. That that's big for them because you want your 3 guys to get those shots, and if you have 2 other unselfish players that are really kind of willing to do the dirty work, that makes it for a very successful basketball team. Obviously,
any games in the next week or so that you're looking forward to?
When's this? This is Wednesday. I think tomorrow's Thursday.
Wednesday.
So,
well, yeah. People will see this on Thursday.
All right. So I'm going to Chicken Lords tonight. That'll be a first chance to see Lords, and Danville Mifflinburg on Friday. I was a little surprised not that Mifflinburg won, but how easily they handled Lewisburg on Tuesday night. It was nearly 20 points. Got off to a real quick start. And they take on Danville, who they beat in the semifinals last year of districts to get to the district final in an upset. So that'll be an interesting matchup. Was looking at the schedule. I think I was a little disappointed. I was hoping there was a Shamokin Danville matchup before Christmas, but both those teams don't play till I think the first one's January 3rd, and the second one is the last day of January. So.
Okay.
So it's heating up. It's going to be interesting. I like you said, the surprise, like Midwest and Lime Mountain, it's interesting to see how these next couple weeks go before Christmas, before we get into the meat of league play, and it should be a real fun season.
Okay. We're going to take a look at college sports. Hasn't really been a busy time right now. Bucknell's kind of on a break for finals. The last time the men played was December 4th. The last time the women played was December 2nd. Both wins. That got the men to 4-3. Right now, they're one of 6 teams in the nation that are undefeated on the road with at least 3 true road games. Struggled at home, though.
I saw a graphic on Twitter yesterday that's about Bucknell, but not really about this team. That it was teams that 5 points or winning percentage in 5 games with 5 points or less, at least 50 games, and Brad Stevens was like at the top, and the second one was Pat Flannery, the Bucknell coach. Oh God, it's been 8-10 years now, but I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I wonder how. I always wonder how they could when Bucknell comes out of this break, especially Saturday. They go to Ohio State to play the Buckeyes.
The men, you can watch that game, Big Ten Network, noon Saturday.
I always wonder sometimes how they come out of that break, because think back to your college days,
sure.
and that that's 10 days of finals at an academic school like Bucknell. They practice, but that's not a time that they get a lot of work in either on the basketball court. So, when do the women get back? When do the women get back on the floor?
The women play Saturday too. The women they host Ryder 2 p.m. Saturday. So if you're looking for something to do, go out to Soika. Women, they're playing well. They've won 5 in a row. They're 7-2. Their last game, they absolutely destroyed Iona. But again, that was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
December 2nd was the last time they played. So same thing for them. How do you deal with that? 2 weeks off in the middle of the season.
That's a veteran team, and they've kind of gone through this these last couple of years.
Sure.
But the other part of that is, they were playing so well going into this break. I'm sure Coach Roussel kind of hates to see their momentum broken up at this point in the season.
Looking over closer to us on, I don't know. I was going to say something about which side of the river, but I don't even know if they're on the same side or different sides, to be honest.
You have to cross the bridge to go to Susquehanna.
They're on the same side of the river.
No, you have to cross the bridge to go to Susquehanna.
I crossed the bridge to go to Lewisburg, too.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant as the same side of the river as us.
No, as each other.
Oh, yeah, they're on the same side of the river.
Susquehanna has played last Saturday, both the men and the women. They had a home doubleheader against different teams, which is odd. Yeah. The men beat Vassar. Really, really good second half. 52-37, something like that. They were down at halftime to get a 6-point win. Second straight win for them to get to 4-3. Put 4 guys in double figures, led by a freshman. Dominic Dunn had 17 points.
And SU struggled last season. The men, really had a tough time dealing with those graduation losses from a Sweet 16 team this season before.
Really good. 2
And
years ago.
It seems like Coach Marcinick has found a rotation now. I think that was the biggest deal at the end of last season is they were playing a lot of guys, and I'm not sure that he felt comfortable with any kind of rotation that he had. And I think he's settled on a core group of kids, and they seem to be playing really well right now. And that seems to be kind of the opposite of what's going on with the women's team. It really seems like Coach Reed's kind of struggling to find a rotation that he's comfortable with.
Yeah, the women dropped their 3rd straight game on Saturday. 2-point loss to Marywood to go to 3-4. And I think Mike Bullock was there for us. I think he said it was their 5th different starting lineup in 7 games. The bright spot's been Erin McQuillan. She's the only girl who started all 7 games, only woman who started all 7 games. She's averaging almost 16 points a game. She's been a good steadying force for them, but that's what Coach Reed said is they just got to find some sort of consistency to start winning again.
It's kind of been a problem for them for a while. They just haven't. They've never. It's 2 or 3 years haven't found that group that is. They've been probably lower level of. Jesus, they've been in so many leagues. Landmark
Conference.
I knew it wasn't the Centennial, and I knew it wasn't the MAC. In the Landmark Conference, and this sounds. I don't know, but it just kind of sounds like. Once they do realize what they can do and where they can do it, that they go on a little run here. It just seems like they just haven't found it yet. There's another girl that's been shooting the ball pretty well too, right? They off the bench.
Nevin Honinger. She started a game or 2 early, but it seemed like they played their best Saturday once she came in off the bench. But again, I mean, there's some reason that she started earlier and wasn't this time. Just trying to find that right rotation, that right group to put together. And I think that's when they get that figured out. And maybe it'll be Saturday at William Penn. They'll start on the trajectory they want to be on headed into those Landmark games.
William Penn?
Yeah, Saturday. Oh, nope, William Patterson.
I was going to say, where's William Penn? I haven't heard of that one.
Saturday at William Patterson.
That one I've heard of.
And the Riverhawk men are going to Wilkes-Barre this weekend, playing in the FNCB Bank Monarch Classic.
So, Kings.
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Also, Lycoming women's basketball. Kayla Klein last week was the MAC Player of the Week for Lycoming, and then coming back from a knee injury and is playing well.
Yeah,
and that is where Kayla McFadden is too from Lewisburg.
Yeah, they've both been key for the Warriors so far. The Warriors were struggling a little bit early in the season. One of their losses was to Susquehanna when the Riverhawks were playing well early. But yeah, 2 local girls on that team. Also, Madison Clocks at Penn College. So if you're watching in the Williamsport area and you want to see some Valley girls play basketball, you got a couple different choices.
Well, and then Maddie Welliver's on Susquehanna for Warrior Run.
Yeah.
It was just who played for Lycoming last year.
Right. And then was the goalie for the women's soccer team at Susquehanna who had a nice run.
Yes.
So lots of Valley athletes doing well at the college level. All right. I'm going to say goodbye to Todd and welcome in Scott Dudinskie to talk a little bit about girls basketball. Yeah. Scott's joining us now to talk about girls high school basketball. We've had 4 game days so far this season. What's jumped out to you?
Well, I think this early in the season, what you're looking for is, all the question marks. You had during the preview time of the year, and what jumped out to me was how would particularly the two teams that graduated 5 starters, how would they respond to new starters and new styles of play this year? Mount Carmel and Shamokin both started 5 seniors last year and in fairly successful seasons, and had to start pretty much with a clean slate. And been mixed reviews so far. Shamokin is 2-1 with a loss to Nativity BVM in their opener. And Mount Carmel is 0-2, starting the year with a 64-18 loss to Dunmore. And
Well, let's put a caveat there. How good is Dunmore?
I think Dunmore is pretty good. I think Dunmore would do that to plenty of teams that are better than Mount Carmel. And Mount Carmel is still a team that starts 1 junior and 4 sophomores. So it's going to be a bit of an evolution for that team to get back to where it has been a perennial district champion and state qualifier. But I certainly think Mount Carmel has the pieces to do it. But a road game at Dunmore for your opener with such a young team, that was, that didn't do them any favors.
Now, last year Mount Carmel and Dunmore also played in the opener, right?
Correct.
With Verano and Miriello and Little
Sure.
and the 5 seniors.
That's right.
And how did that one go?
That was a little closer, but what they had, the measuring stick that Mount Carmel had was the second round state playoff game against Dunmore at the end of the year. So it bookended their season. You start the season with Dunmore, you end the season with Dunmore, and the game in the state playoffs was it was a 7 to 9 point loss if memory serves. Mm-hmm. But the best performance that Mount Carmel has had in a state playoff loss in many years. That they've gotten to deeper in the state playoffs and hit a wall sometimes, but I would say, going back maybe 6 years since they've had a game, a loss, I should say, where they played as well. It was very competitive.
Okay. Now, you saw Mount Carmel, tough game against Lewisburg Monday night. Before we'll talk about Lewisburg in a second, but what did you see from the junior and the 4 sophomores that gives you hope for Mount Carmel?
Well, just their style of play. They will commit to defense, and that's been a Mount Carmel hallmark throughout this reign that the Red Tornadoes have had under Lisa Verano. The willingness to play defense, the ability to create turnovers and turn that into offense, and really affect teams, affect the pace of play, affect shake the other team's confidence, swing momentum. They do that all with defense, and this team's committed to that. The performance of sophomore Danny Ray Reno, a 6'2" center, who I don't think it's much of a stretch to say by the time she's finished, she'll be the most ardently recruited player that they've had in this long stretch with her size and skill. The way she can finish around the basket, she is setting herself up for good things beyond the high school level for certain, and I feel pretty confident in saying that. And she had 24 points against Lewisburg, 13 rebounds, and she's one of the players that I considered for our preseason team. Mm-hmm. And there were a number of girls who were performing well early that made that team. Riley Griffith at Mifflinburg, Grace Kelleher at Lewisburg, Liliana Bickle at Lourdes Regional. They're all having nice seasons. But another thing that stood out in the early going is how well girls that I considered for that first team, that preseason all-star team, have performed. I've been impressed by Kennedy Straup at Greenwood, a 5'11" junior who is averaging 21 points through 3 games. She had a high of 29 in their opener. Milton senior Kaylin Scott, 5'7" guard, averaging 16 points through 3 games, and she already has 9 three-pointers as she started off well for the Black Panthers. And then Grace Nazi from Shamokin, she's a 5'9", kind of a swing player, an in-between guard-forward type, who probably defends like a forward, but plays offense a little more like a guard. And she's been right around 10 points in the early going, but she has the ability as a sophomore to produce much more. So as far as the early season goes, teams that have had to replace much of their personnel and start kind of from scratch has stood out to me, as have these second tier players that have really stepped up and kind of confirmed my thought that maybe they deserve to be in consideration for a preseason all-star team. So
it's fair to say you think Mount Carmel's going to be pretty good by the end of the year?
I think they'll be in a good place. The thing that Mount Carmel has new to it, and not only in terms of personnel, but what it's looking at in terms of its division in Division III of the Heartland Conference, It's an underdog this year to a Loyalsock team, which is loaded. Loyalsock is lost one good contributor and then got a girl back from an ACL tear, Maddie Fox, who was a terrific player. So that really it's a wash in terms of loss and gain, that they come in basically ready-made to play and have performed well early. So Mount Carmel not only finds itself as an underdog in the division, but after winning Class AAA in the district of the last several years, they're now a AA team.
Oh.
Where things are a little bit more thorny, especially with the possibility of confrontation with rival Southern Columbia, the last year's district champion in AA. I would look for a potential matchup of those two down the road in that playoff scenario, possibly for the championship itself. And folks can get a preview of that this Saturday night when those two teams meet up in a Heartland 3 game.
Let's talk about Southern. I know, just talking to you in the office, that you were impressed with their win Saturday night over Central Columbia. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact that they won, and also that's an overtime game that Southern just blitzed them in that 4-minute extra period.
Yeah, it's hard for a team to score 17 points in a regular 8-minute quarter, but to score 17 points in the 4-minute overtime really speaks volumes of the firepower that Southern Columbia has. Now, you have to understand, this is a team that lost two of the best players that the program has had, and guard Madison Clock, 1,000-point scorer, and center Abby Hager, who, if not for some illness, just missed. She was in the 940 to 50-point range and dealt with some illness in her career, or she was a surefire 1,000-point scorer as well. But you take those two off the table from a district championship team, and trust me when I say most everything in Southern Columbia's offense ran through those two last year. If they both didn't touch the ball on every possession last year, it was a minor upset because of how well they were regarded. So not only do you bring back a team that deferred to those two and has to find out how to play on its own and make its own breaks and succeed on its own, you bring a new coach into the mix, and Bill Callahan, a former Shamokin coach, won 150 games in 9 years at Shamokin, won 2 district championships with the Indians.
Wow.
He comes to Southern Columbia with, I would hesitate to say, a little more disciplined approach. He's gonna crack the whip a little more. He's gonna expect more out of the defense, and he's not going to let girls look for one or two players on the court to score. If you're out on the court, you're a viable scorer. You got to take a shot when you have it. And I think they have the athletes to do that, and a little bit of that shows through in the early season with a 17-point overtime period to win at Central Columbia. Really remarkable stuff.
We touched on Lewisburg. Big night from Grace Kelleher, going on the road to win at Mount Carmel. Even though Mount Carmel's not what they've been the past couple years, that's still a real nice early season win for the Green Dragons.
It is, and as both coaches, new coach at Lewisburg, Brent Sample, and longtime coach at Mount Carmel, Lisa Verano, talked about, the difference in that game really was a 4-year starter at point guard, Grace Kelleher, someone who knows when to push the offense or pull back, to settle in, to keep her eyes up court, make the extra pass, and really just, at times attack the basket, get a 3-point play, which she did, or, draw the defense, penetrate and dish. She's an exceptional player with really a really good basketball savvy to go along with obvious skill. She can hit the 3-point shot. She can hit the mid-range jumper. And in a game like that, Kurt, I couldn't get away from the word orchestrated.
Okay.
She really did in the end game of that game, when it was at a tipping point, whether Mount Carmel has an opportunity to tie or to fall behind. She made the plays that pushed the momentum and put everything in Lewisburg's favor, and let the Green Dragons come out with a really nice, not only a season opening win on the road against a good program, but just a tone setter, I think. Just something that says, this is who we are, this is who we can be, with a new coach, and it validated a lot of about what they have there.
What did you see from the Green Dragons as far as, for people who haven't got to see them yet but may have seen them last year under Coach Stam, what is it different? Is it the same with Coach Sample?
Well, in large respects, it is. In large respects, it's the same.
Okay.
Here's a guy who worked with who Brent Sample played at Lewisburg under Todd Tilford, and when Phil Stam was an assistant coach, then coached lower down in the tiers of the varsity program, and was asked by Coach Stam to come up and sit alongside him with varsity some 7-8 years ago. So he's absorbed a lot of what Stam does. It's understated. A lot of what they do is done in practice and in prep. There's not a lot of yelling or changing things on the court. They stay with what they do best and what they've practiced to do. So they started off in man on Monday night and in man defense, and they have the athletes to do that. He went maybe, I want to say probably 4 to 5 girls deep, and all those girls contributed. They were no obvious liabilities off the bench, and I think it'll be more of the same from Lewisburg, which can be just kind of some understated brilliance. They really just execute fundamentally and take advantage of their strengths. And right now, that's a point guard in Grace Kelleher. Some size inside, a little bit of size. It was a liability against a 6'2" Mount Carmel sophomore, but I think it will serve them well in Division II of the Heartland Conference. But it's a team that, again, another one with question marks. Lewisburg's a team that didn't graduate necessarily 5 starters, but graduated 5 players who contributed to a league championship team last year. So they had some question marks of their own, and they were answered in the positive respect on Monday night.
Then one team that, at least from my perspective, which is not as much in-depth knowledge as you have, that had seemed pretty set maybe coming into the season, is Mifflinburg. Mm-hmm. You saw them opening night, saw a milestone. What's your impression of seeing them on the court with 3, 4? How many starters back?
4.
4 starters back.
Mm-hmm. Mifflinburg is an interesting case because on paper you would take a graduate in forward Michaela Valentine and take what is a junior in Mara Shuck and put her right in that place and push the 5 girls out on the floor and have at it. That's not necessarily always the case. Michaela Valentine played a significant role as a defender, a rebounder. So her loss isn't as easy as swapping in another warm body, so to speak. But what Mifflinburg does bring to the table are the Griffith twins, now seniors, Riley and Reagan, who play guard. Reagan is more of the facilitator. Riley is more of the scorer. As you noted, she broke Kayla Klein's program record in their opener, past Kayla Klein's 1,211 points for her career, and now Riley Griffith is and will be the Mifflinburg program scoring leader. And then you have a nice piece inside in a 6-footer. I would say she's about 6'1", Libby Whitaker, an athlete committed to play softball at North Carolina State, who has good footwork, good sense around the basket, can finish with the ball. And in fact, this is the 3rd year I've seen Mifflinburg start the season by trying to establish Libby inside, make that entry pass, and let her go to work against some inferior, certainly some smaller competition. Mm-hmm. So that's something. Even though you would consider Mifflinburg more of a guard scoring team or a slashing team, Coach Kelly Griffith still insists on pounding that ball into where they have a strength. And and it's worked out well. They have a girl who broke out a little bit at the end of last season in the playoffs, Angela Reamer. A guard who is certainly that's in that slasher mode and can hit the 3-point shot. So what Mifflinburg brings to the table is one of the most well-rounded teams that we have now. If you talk about their loss earlier this week, 67-63 in double overtime to Loyalsock, that the only flaw that showed was maybe their free throw shooting. The Wildcats missed 15 free throws in that game, so I know what they were doing in practice on Tuesday. But you look at the quality of the game, taking a good team like that to double overtime with the adversity of those missed free throws, and from what I understand, it took. We talked about Maddie Fox a little earlier in the podcast here, coming back from injury. It took buzzer beaters by Maddie Fox both to send it to overtime and then to send it to the second overtime, or Mifflinburg would have come out ahead if not for clutch plays by her. Right. So it's a good team there. I consider Mifflinburg a very strong challenger to the HAC, the Heartland 1 division this season.
Okay. Saturday you mentioned Southern Columbia Mount Carmel as a game to watch. This is going to come out Thursday, and then we'll have another one come out next Thursday. So other than that Saturday game, what are you looking forward to in that week span in between when we're sitting here talking about girls basketball?
Well, here's one thing that jumped out at me while I was kind of preparing for to sit down with you today, Kurt. Was in recent years there have been a push to get. No, I shouldn't say a push. I don't know if it's necessarily a directive or anything that anybody tries to do. But I've noticed that teams have more and more games prior to the holiday break, or what I call the holiday break.
Okay.
A lot of teams play in tournaments over the holidays, so it's not necessarily a break. But I've noticed that teams play sometimes 8, 9 games in this month.
Out of the 22?
Out of the 22,
Wow.
they can play as many as a third, if not almost half of their games before even the turn of the calendar year. The thing that struck me this year is not necessarily the quantity of those games, it's the quality of them. And I know that nobody really wants to hear me go through a list, but I have to just mention some of the teams that have set themselves up this year. Let's take Mifflinburg, for example. We
Sure.
just talked about the good team that they have. They opened at Midwest, then they played Loyalsock, but they're going to have a run of Lewisburg, Danville, and Southern Columbia in a row.
Wow.
Yes. The Lewisburg team that opened with Mount Carmel and plays Mifflinburg tonight is going to play Central Columbia and Montoursville, 2 very good teams,
Sure.
2 test teams. But the ones that really get me are the teams that we talked about meeting in that Saturday night game, Mount Carmel and Southern Columbia, and this goes to the point of why that early season game is so important. Mount Carmel opened with Dunmore, lost 64-18. We mentioned that. They lost to Lewisburg, a 51-40. Again, a game that was close for a while. Now they have to go to Central Columbia, which is the Heartland 2 favorite, with bringing back the group that it brings back, all of its starters. Play Southern on Saturday, then a great Loyalsock team and
Wow.
an improving Bloomsburg team. I saved the best for last. It's Southern Columbia. After playing at Central Columbia, Selinsgrove, and Central in the tournament, they get Warrior Run tonight at Mount Carmel on Saturday, and then run off a streak of Mifflinburg, Bloomsburg, Hughesville, which is much improved, and then the Shamokin tournament, where they could face the Indians, they could face Lord's Regional, maybe both. All this, granted, in this month before the calendar turns, and there are 2 months of the regular season, the better part of 2 months of the regular season to go beyond that. So Southern Columbia, it's good they're playing well early because they're going to have to survive a schedule like that. That, I think, is what we'll be talking about in the few weeks to come before the holiday, is how well some of these teams held up against the gauntlet of that early season scheduling.
Yeah, you think about, all these tough games before you get into the heart of your actual league schedule, and then you've got the playoffs, and all these games count now with the power rankings. I don't know if they're going to end up counting more or less than just counting wins, but
Sure.
I mean, those are some real tough tests for December.
Yeah, they are, and it's not like college football where you can look ahead to when somebody won't have a certain player and get them on your schedule. These schedules are made either by the league or by ADs who sometimes catch can, and it doesn't really matter who the personnel is or necessarily to an AD when they play them. So sometimes a coach will get his schedule and say, "Oh my goodness, what am I supposed to do with this?" But I've never heard a coach say, this schedule won't make a difficult schedule won't benefit my team in some way. You take the wins and losses early. They're aiming to be better end of February, early March when playoffs and seeding is at stake.
Sure. All right, that's our first ever winter podcast. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week to do it again.